I dedicated 15 years to building our family business. But when my brother got a new truck as an engagement gift, I realized it was time to leave. After I left, the company quickly fell apart. I was the backbone of the Wilson family plumbing business. My name is Alex and I'm 35 years old. When most of my friends went off to college, I stayed behind to help my dad grow the business. I learned everything firsthand, from clearing stubborn drains and fixing leaky pipes, to designing complex systems and handling upset customers, especially during winter emergencies in the middle of the night. Over time, I took over rowing the business, and my father gradually shifted to more of a managerial role from his garage. When he started, he had just a van and a toolkit. By the time I left, we had 8 trucks and 12 employees, or more accurately, they did. There was no magic or luck behind that growth. I sacrificed weekends, worked thousands of hours, and focused on building our reputation in the neighborhood. Every positive review, every returning client, every referral, I personally made sure they were satisfied with our work. 5 years ago, my younger brother Travis joined us. He's 28 now, but he still behaves like a kid who's been forced to work in the family business. He constantly arrives late, takes long breaks, and leaves tasks unfinished. I can't count how many times I've had to deal with customer complaints after his shifts. Unlike me, always available for emergencies on weekends, Travis often forgets his phone, but Dad always has an excuse. He's still learning, Alex. Not everyone has your natural talent. The warning signs were there long before. New hires I trained often got promoted ahead of me. When I implemented a new scheduling system that improved efficiency by 30%, Travis was given credit for supporting the program at our corporate meeting. When I suggested diversifying into business contracts, Dad said it was too risky. 6 months later, Travis made the same suggestion, and Dad called it innovative thinking. Over time, the disparity in treatment became too obvious to ignore. For years, Dad had promised me a partnership, lingering ownership interests that never came to pass. Meanwhile, I found out that Travis was making $105,000 more per year, despite having less experience and fewer responsibilities. My 2010 vehicle had over 180,000 miles on it, while Travis and Dad drove cars that were less than 3 years old. Loyalty was important. I told myself that family comes first, and that one day, Dad would recognize what I had done. I was wrong. For months, my truck had been breaking down frequently. The suspension was shot, the transmission was slipping, and there were rust holes in the cargo area that let water in during rainstorms, damaging expensive equipment. After a particularly serious breakdown that cost us a major client, Dad finally admitted that we needed a new vehicle. I was inspecting the damage on my old truck that evening, when Dad came out to the garage with 2 beers. He handed one to me, leaning against the workbench. For a moment, everything felt like it did before, back when Travis hadn't yet joined the company. I used to resolve issues with Dad. Remember when I taught you how to change the belt on the old Ford? His weathered face softened into a rare smile. You couldn't have been more than 12, he said. I nodded as the memory came back to me. You let me do the whole job while you supervised. You told me I had the steadiest hands you'd ever seen on a kid. Never seen anyone take to plumbing like you did, Alex. You've got natural talent. He looked at the truck instead of me, while sipping his beer slowly. This business, it wouldn't be what it is without you. For a moment, I felt valued, something that had become rare in recent times. I felt a connection to him. Before I went back inside, he gave me a friendly clap on the shoulder, and it made me wonder why those moments of understanding had become so infrequent. Why couldn't he see my worth in front of Travis, in the way I was compensated, or in the business decisions that were made? For weeks, I explored my options. I researched the best deals, organized all the paperwork, and balanced cargo capacity with fuel efficiency. I even worked out financial arrangements with our longtime bank for the next 10 years. This truck would serve as my mobile office. I wanted to do it right. That Sunday, Dad invited everyone over for dinner. Travis brought his fiancée Jessica, whom he had just engaged to after only 8 months of dating. Mom prepared a feast, and Dad seemed unusually happy. When dessert was finished, he stood up and called for everyone's attention. My heart soared. Perhaps, I thought, he would finally recognize my efforts. Maybe he would even announce the partnership we'd discussed. Instead, Dad pulled out a set of keys attached to a silver keychain, with the business's logo. He handed them to Travis with the widest smile I'd seen in ages. "To help you start your new life, son," he said. "The new company truck is yours. I had them add all the upgrades you wanted. Consider it an engagement gift from your mother and me." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. Jessica clapped with joy as Travis smiled smugly. My emotions went unnoticed by them. I turned my gaze away while my mother busied herself cleaning the plates. Finally I found my voice, though it was tight with emotion. "Dad, we discussed that truck for service calls. I handle emergency work, Travis doesn't even do that." Dad dismissed it with a wave. "You can keep using your current truck for a while longer. Travis needs to project a professional image now that he'll be taking over more client relationships. Besides, you know how to keep that old one running. You've always been good with repair." Without even pretending to be grateful, I watched as Travis dangled the keys, discussing how he might personalize the paint job. His latest hobby was the truck that should have been mine, the one I needed for my real job. Something inside me finally snapped on the way home in my squeaky old pickup. It wasn't just about the truck, it was about being neglected, underappreciated, and taken for granted for the last 50. It was knowing that Travis would always be the preferred son, and I would always be the dependable workhorse, no matter how much I contributed. I had trouble sleeping that night. I started browsing job postings, something I'd never really considered before. I called Jack, a former coworker who had moved to a rival company, to ask about their business. I was shocked by his response. "Alex, with your skills and your connections, you could write your own ticket anywhere in the county. What's kept you at your dad's place for so long?" For the first time, I understood that my own mistreatment had been enabled by what I had mistaken for loyalty. I had forgotten my own worth because I'd become so used to being underappreciated. Jack told me that his business was looking for a skilled expert to oversee their commercial division, exactly the opportunity my dad's business had refused me. Over the next week, I meticulously documented everything I handled. Comprehensive guidelines for our system. I refused to be like them by undermining the company, but I also didn't want to leave them a reason to call me after I left. When I arrived at work early the next Monday, I placed an envelope on my father's desk. As usual, he arrived late, about an hour late. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief as he opened the envelope. 2 weeks' notice? Alex, is this a joke? He leaned back in his chair and asked. I calmly and professionally explained my decision. I only briefly mentioned the incident with the truck, choosing instead to focus on the repeated, unmet promises about the partnership and my need for professional development. I had accepted a position with Brighton Plumbing Services. Dad sneered, "You'll be back in a week. What we provide you here is unmatched by them. Isn't this just a tirade over the truck?" He didn't even ask about my salary. He didn't know that I'd be earning almost 40% more, with benefits, and that I'd have a clear path to partnership in just 2 years. The news spread fast around the company. Instead of his usual smug expression, Travis's face turned red with dread. He cornered me in the supply room and growled, "You can't just walk away. Who will be in charge of the West Side contracts, or the hospital maintenance, or the emergency calls?" His confident exterior cracked for a moment. He lowered his voice to a whisper. "Dad has been preparing me to take over leadership, but half of what you do is unknown to me." I was taken aback by the admission of his own uncertainty. But it was no longer my problem. He had been happy to take the credit for years while I did all the work. I replied, "I'm sure you'll figure it out. You've got a nice new truck to drive around in." In an unexpected turn, those 2 weeks felt freeing. I began to offload as many of my duties as possible. I trained others, introduced new technicians to important clients, and carefully documented everything in a 3-ring binder labeled Essential Operations. On my last day I left the binder, my business phone, my credit card, and the building keys on my father's desk. Dad barely noticed that I was gone. He was certain that I'd return within a few days. That night Mom called me, tears in her eyes begging me to reconsider. "Family businesses have ups and downs, but we have to stay united," she said. I calmly told her that, despite always being underappreciated, I had remained loyal for 15 years. This wasn't a rash decision. It was long overdue by 15 years. The first month at Brighton Plumbing was an eye-opening experience. I was referred to as the best plumber in the county by my new boss, Kevin, both to clients and employees. In addition to being recognized, my recommendations were put into practice. When I suggested a more efficient method for scheduling business maintenance, Kevin gave me the tools to implement it, and encouraged me to make it a company-wide system. Then my first big test arrived. For months, Brighton had unsuccessfully bid on the Lakeside Corporate Park contract. I knew I had some important inside information when Kevin said they were making one last attempt. For years, Wilson Family Plumbing had handled building maintenance, and I was fully aware of their priorities and the challenges they had faced. Knowing this, I was almost certain Brighton could win the contract. However, it felt wrong to use such information. It would be a breach of confidentiality. Even though technically I hadn't signed anything that would prevent it, I considered my options throughout a restless night. I realized that what Brighton offered me, respect, fair compensation, and the opportunity to demonstrate my value was important, but not at the cost of my morals. The next morning, I went into Kevin's office and explained my stand. Although I can't provide specific information about Lakeside systems, with my knowledge of similar properties, I could help Brighton come up with a stronger general proposal. Kevin looked at me for a while, and then said, "You know, most people would have used whatever advantage they had. Alex, I hired you specifically because of your integrity. Despite this, we managed to secure the contract based on our bid rather than insider knowledge." That moment, more than any simple win, solidified my position at Brighton. Most unexpectedly, I completed my assignment within a reasonable time frame. Travis had made a simple mistake, and as a result, there would be no more late-night calls or weekend work. Dad had made unrealistic promises regarding deadlines without consulting me first. I began hiking on Saturdays, reconnected with old friends, and even started dating someone who wasn't drained by my constant work emergency. Meanwhile, the consequences at Wilson Family Plumbing were immediate and severe. Their Yelp rating dropped from 4.8 to 3.2 stars in just 2 weeks. When they found out I had left, customers who had specifically asked for me were upset. Missed meetings and duplicate bookings resulted from the breakdown of the complex scheduling system I had set up, which no one else fully understood. By the third week, the texts from Travis started coming in. First, "How can I view the maintenance records for the hospital?" Then from Dad, "Where did you save the Peterson job warranty details?" I simply responded with straightforward business-like instructions for the paperwork I had left behind. When Travis tried to manage the quarterly maintenance at Riverside Medical Center, our biggest commercial client, things went wrong. A storage area flooded because he failed to close a major valve. The hospital immediately terminated their contract with us, resulting in a loss of $180,000 annually. 2 experienced technicians quit that same week, complaining about the disorganized schedule and lack of direction. One of them, Tom, who now works for a competitor, told me what happened next. After a complete breakdown at the office, Travis shouted that he was being set up to fail, throwing tools across the workshop. He said his father had thrown him into the deep end without proper training and expected him to take over my responsibilities immediately, without giving him the time to learn. Tom explained that eventually Travis collapsed on a bench, head in his hands, muttering, "Alex made it look so simple." I had no idea. I didn't bother to find out. It seemed that Dad simply stood there, pale, as the company he had built fell apart around him. The weight of real responsibility was too much for the Golden Sun's facade to hold up. The tone of my family's texts changed drastically. They started with "Please call us," and soon escalated to "We need to talk. The business is in serious trouble." Mom began calling me every day, her messages becoming more urgent. Jessica, Travis's fiancée, even reached out saying that Travis was so stressed that he couldn't sleep. I kept my distance and focused on succeeding in my new role. In my first 2 months, I closed 3 significant commercial contracts and received a hefty bonus. I was finally able to save enough money for a down payment on a small property, thanks to my raise and manageable work schedule. I also bought myself a new truck, not a corporate vehicle funded by the results of labor that had been adequately compensated. News spreads quickly in any industry. Suppliers who dealt with both businesses brought up the fall of Wilson Family Plumbing. One person said, "Heard your dad had to lay off 3 more guys while delivering parts. It's tough to see a long-established company going through such difficulties." I remained dignified in my work. Despite the temptation, I never spoke ill of my family. One Tuesday night, after not speaking for 3 months, my father called. There was a change in his voice. Older, defeated. "Alex, we need to talk in person. The company, it's not good." We decided to meet on neutral ground at a cafe halfway between our houses. When they showed up, the physical changes were striking. Dad looked much older,
His usually flawless appearance had become unkempt. Travis seemed to have gone weeks without sleep. Dark circles under his eyes, and the usual swagger was gone. They outlined the dire situation. Revenue was down 60%. There were only 4 employees left, and their business loan was at risk due to bank issues. 3 trucks had already been sold, including the new one that Travis had been so proud of, all sacrificed to keep the lights on. Dad had even taken out a mortgage on his home to help finance the struggling company. "We made mistakes," Dad said, his voice cracking. "I took you for granted. Now I'm paying the price." I witnessed my father crying for the first time in my life. Travis couldn't look me in the eye and instead stared at the table. Dad pushed a folder across the table towards me. It contained a partnership agreement that included full operational management, a significant pay raise, and 45% ownership. "Please," he whispered, "help us preserve what remains." The previous Alex would have seized the opportunity, eager to be acknowledged for the first time, after longing for it. But the day my truck was given away, that version of me passed away. I simply stated that I had no interest in going back. From day one I had discovered a place where my abilities were appreciated. Not after a disastrous failure forced acknowledgement. I clarified, "I'm not trying to punish you. I just realized how valuable I am. I tried to earn something that should have been given to me freely for 15 years. Respect, just compensation, recognition. I refused to go back." At last, Travis's voice was hollow. "Until you left I had no idea how much you were doing. Running service calls seemed simple to me." He hesitated, swallowing hard, thinking, "I believe Dad was giving you preferential treatment, completing all of the crucial work for you. I was mistaken. I took no pleasure in their misery. Rather, I provided what assistance I could. Names of potential qualified plumbers for their reorganized company. Ideas for simplifying operations to continue running with a reduced workforce. Suggestions for clients to focus on in order to restore their reputation." I told them, "This isn't about retaliation. I didn't leave to harm you. I left because I was worthy of better." Wilson Family Plumbing is still in business 6 months later, but it's a shadow of what it used to be. Dad has taken a big step back and is considering early retirement, instead of delegating everything. Travis has been compelled to learn the ropes and handle service calls himself. After losing the majority of their commercial clients, they now only have 3 trucks and focus on residential work. It's awkward when we first see each other at family gatherings, but we eventually settle into a new routine. After seeing my new home, and learning that I had been promoted to commercial division manager, Mom finally stopped trying to guilt-trip me into going back. Even Travis, who occasionally texts me technical questions that I respond to politely, has grown to respect me despite his reluctance. I don't wake up with a knot in my stomach for the first time in my adult life. I've changed from the fervently devoted son who never received the approval he sought. The physical strain of plumbing work wasn't the biggest weight I ever carried. It was the emotional burden of trying to win the respect and affection of those who didn't value me. Retaliation isn't always the reason to leave. It can be the only route to self-respect. At times I've discovered that the best form of retaliation isn't seeing other people fail after you've left. It's succeeding so thoroughly that your value is determined by your absence. Kevin told me last month that he wants me to manage his second location, which he plans to open in the nearby county. He claims that I could eventually buy him out and turn it into my own business. I find myself visualizing the fleet of trucks, organizing the service area, and creating the logo in my head. Wilson Blue was the only color painted, not with malice, but because I'm creating something that is genuinely mine at last.